Typhoon Bavi, the strongest storm to hit mainland China this year, has weakened to a severe tropical storm after making landfall along the country's eastern coast. Before reaching China, Bavi swept across a chain of Japanese islands and brought heavy rain to Taiwan as it passed just north of the island. While the storm will continue weakening as it moves northwest, authorities are warning that strong winds and heavy rainfall could still affect many cities across eastern China in the coming days. Chinese authorities evacuated more than 2 million people ahead in the region where the typhoon made landfall. And I asked the meteorologist Matthew Cappucci whether such an extreme safety measure was justified.
I would say so. We tend to think about tropical cyclones and typhoons in terms of their maximum wind speed. That's how they're rated on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale when we talk about like a Category 3, a Category 5, whatever. In this case, it's really just a remnant tropical cyclone, low-end typhoon, but the key is it's now dropping all of its moisture, leading to very heavy torrential rains of 30 to 50 centimeters in just 24 hours or less across much of Zhejiang and Fujian provinces. And that's key because the number one death producer, the number one cause of fatalities with tropical cyclones is not the surge, is not the wind, is that freshwater flooding. We've already seen torrential downpours from last week's tropical cyclone there, Maysak, that also brought 2 tornadoes in Hubei province that caused 12 deaths. So the ground is already saturated. Now add the remnants of Bavi, the current tropical cyclone, and you can see why flooding will be such a big issue as you see right there.
Right, so normal typhoon season behavior.
I would say so. In the Pacific, typhoon season runs longer than in the Atlantic because the waters are that much warmer. We see water temperatures roughly 33, 34 plus degrees Celsius. That is high octane fuel for these tropical cyclones to get going. So realistically, anytime from April all the way through November, you are primed to see these higher end storms. And unfortunately, it looks like more may be in the offing, with models simulating a potential conga line or of 2 or 3 additional cyclones in the next 2-ish weeks.
Right. So, I mean, we're seeing that the typhoon has now weakened to a tropical storm, but you're saying there's more to come, so the worst might not be over.
Yeah, its remnants are moving very slowly northwards, and like we said, we're just dumping so much rainfall there. The good news, they're primarily north of Shanghai right now, but still much of northeast China all the way up to Beijing could see heavy rainfall. The other thing, too, is the tropical remnants are interacting with kind of a frontal boundary draped across southern and eastern China. We call that the Mayu front, and it just sort of sits there over the summertime. It's this semi-stagnant feature in the summer weather, and it's like a guardrail for all this moisture to pool along. That focuses the rainfall, leads to even more rain. And so, yeah, flooding is going to be a very serious threat for the next roughly 2 more days.
Right. Matthew, how much a factor do things like climate change and El Niño have on these storms?
Yeah, so any year we're going to see some summertime cyclones in China and Southeast Asia in the Pacific. What I will say, though, this year, the development of an El Niño pattern, which begins with the warming of water temperatures in the eastern and central tropical Pacific, is likely to induce a much more significant cyclone season. You have warmer waters, more rising air. It's easier for cyclones to form. So we're expecting a potentially overactive or even hyperactive season for the Pacific. The other thing, too, that added to the top of a background of already warming waters does sort of tip the scale towards more and potentially stronger cyclones, not only this year, but in the years to come.
And what about, apart from the Pacific, what about elsewhere on the globe?
The good news, if there is any, the Atlantic, which has been beleaguered after several very difficult years, looks to have a quiet hurricane season, potentially the quietest in roughly 13 years in the Atlantic. We always say what goes up must come down, so all that rising air in the Pacific is mirrored by subsidence or sinking in the Atlantic, squashing some of the attempts at tropical cyclone formation, plus harsher upper-level winds over the Atlantic will tear apart any fledgling storms. So fewer storms for the U.S. and the Caribbean. Unfortunately, much of the Pacific is going to be a pretty rough season.
And what would you say are the lessons that local authorities should be taking from this?
We always tell folks, run from the water, hide from the wind. I think so many people get caught up on the category of a storm, whether it be a hurricane, a typhoon, whatever. Realistically, the maximum wind speeds in a storm are relegated very close to that center. What causes the most damage is almost always the flooding and those secondary impacts. We forget about tornadoes sometimes. The swirl, the vorticity, the spin from tropical cyclones can produce some tornadoes, as we saw just last week in Hubei province, about 30, 40 kilometers east of Wuhan, as several tornadoes formed there. So it's not just about the tropical cyclone itself, it's how it interacts with other weather systems to produce a slew of different hazards.
Matthew Cappucci, senior meteorologist with MyRadar. Always good having you with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mojib Latif is the climate researcher and oceanologist with the Gilmar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research. He's with us from Hamburg in northern Germany. Hello, sir. Welcome to the program. China has been hit by 2 typhoons in just over a week. Is this unusual?
Not really. The typhoon season will continue for several months, and so we can assess the season only in several months when the season is over.
Right. And, we keep hearing climate change. We also keep hearing particularly this word, El Niño. Finally, we're in the El Niño season. Tell us more about what El Niño is and how it affects storms like this one.
Yes, El Niño is an unusual warming of the tropical Pacific, especially in the eastern and central part of the basin, and it occurs on average every 4 years. So in principle, it's a natural phenomenon. And if it affects also tropical storms, but in different ways. We expect over the Atlantic less tropical storms, so less Atlantic hurricanes, but on the other hand, we expect more typhoons in the Pacific area in response to El Niño. So this is the statistics that we have now for many decades, and this doesn't necessarily mean it will be always the case, but there is a good chance that we will have more typhoons in the Pacific region.
Right, because I was just about to ask you that, because you talk about it being a natural phenomenon. So I'm just wondering if this pattern is here to stay, or is there something we can do to reduce the impact of it?
Well, most importantly, it would be necessary to stop global warming, okay, because the global greenhouse gas emissions are still continuing, and the oceans warm, and also the tropical Pacific is unusually warm, especially north of the El Niño region, and this is where the typhoons develop. And so, although we can't really say whether El Niños are becoming stronger or not, but the mere fact that the oceans are warmer than, say, several decades ago means that there is a potential that tropical storms can become stronger. And what we observe actually is that the very strong tropical storms actually become more frequent.
Right. So storms are becoming more frequent, more destructive, as we've been seeing. Is there a way people can be better prepared for the tough challenges ahead?
Well, it's up to the governments of the individual countries. All we can do from the science side is to make predictions, and these predictions are actually quite good, at least say 5 to 6 months ahead. So you can prepare yourself for El Niños and also for the tropical storms. I mean, a tropical storm is a weather phenomenon, so you can't predict it months ahead, but you can predict it, say, a week ahead. So that's still enough time to take action to avoid the worst.
Right. I mean, when we talk about climate change and we know the world we live in now, a lot of powerful nations who could contribute to tackling climate change, some don't believe in it, and money to fight it is really not much available. What can we expect in the years ahead in the fight against climate change, you think?
What we have to expect is that climate change will continue. There are two major reasons for this. One is the physical inertia of the system. So we are dealing with an inert system, and it takes time until the Earth system responds to action. That's one aspect. And the other aspect, and that's probably the more important aspect, is that the global greenhouse gas emissions, and that's the only thing that matters, the global emissions, are still rising. And even after the Paris Agreement in 2015, so we can't really expect that, say, for decades, global warming will stop. So it will
Right.
continue, okay? And the best we can do is still to limit it to below 2 degrees. But with every year we are wasting, it becomes more and more difficult to meet the Paris goals.
Right. Climatologist Mojib Latif in Hamburg. Thank you.
You're welcome.